Remember the month of November. Will this be a November for Nebraska to remember with 3 pretty big opportunity games? If you want to hear the Huskers talk about it, Ohio State, Wisconsin, Iowa. We'll see how it goes. But today, you're listening to the Pick Six podcast in November. I'm Evan Bland with Sam McKewon, Jimmy Watkins, Omaha.com, Omaha World-Herald. Gentlemen, how's your November treating you so far?
What are we, one day in? Say the first day.
I think the second day.
This is second day.
Okay.
October, bad for Nebraska. Not good. 1-3. They're bad in Octobers. So they got to hope Novembers are better. Side note, Halloween on Sunday. That was the end of October.
Mm-hmm.
My wife proposed, and I agree, that we need to move Halloween off of October 31st and just make it a floating day that falls on the final day, the final Friday of October.
Because?
Because when kids trick-or-treat on a Sunday night, the next day it's like Super Bowl Sunday. Like it's the next day. There's kids that my daughter comes home and says there's kids that didn't even go to school.
They just stayed home and had their sugar
To be
crash.
clear, we did not talk about this last week, but Halloween has become a holiday that is so much bigger than when I was a kid. Like it's unbelievable. And so when I was a kid, I stopped trick-or-treating when I was 12 years old, and from then on out, I was throwing Crunch Bars at 4-year-old pumpkins. Not now. Now, like Halloween is the biggest holiday this side of Christmas. It's like Christmas and then it's Halloween, or it might be Halloween and Christmas. I don't know. But like people, my daughter spent 3 days on Halloween.
Halloween over Thanksgiving?
Oh yeah.
Really?
Oh, it's the day of self-expression.
Okay, I could see that. But I mean, people are not.
And people value self-expression certainly more than they value turkey.
I think you might be,
especially through cosplay.
How much of this is because you have children, and so you are? I mean, children are naturally drawn to Halloween. I'm sure for most kids, absolutely, Halloween might even be above Christmas.
My Facebook feed was littered with people who not only took their kids but dressed up themselves. Again, when you combine cosplay, is that how you say it?
Mm-hmm.
Cosplay, cosplay. When you combine that with candy and with the fact that the event has become like the official Star Wars / Disney Day of Self-Expression, Halloween is maybe as big as possible. So I'm actually glad when November hits because I'm ready for that day to be done. And it's a wonderful day, but it's now turned into like 4 days. And now it's on this day, we're going to go get candy out of someone's car trunk. On this day, we're going to go to a pumpkin patch. On this day, we're going to go to a bat cave. On this day, we're going to go to a haunted house. On these 4 days, we're going to watch horror movies. On these 7 days, we're going to have a candy corral at our work or a church. And I'm like, enough!
Wow.
Are these not just fall activities though? Like pumpkin patch, haunted house related to Halloween, but
because it's Halloween. You don't go because it's not fall activity. Sure. Did you ride on a hay rack ride any time as a child? I didn't.
No, not really.
It's just another month. And it was 1 day in the year. And you went and got candy, and you ate the candy, and you got sick. And then back when I was a kid, you used to check for the little holes in the candy bars because there was that scare of people putting needles in.
Yeah, right.
Now, it's like 27 days in a month. So that's I'm glad it's November. Because we don't have anything now until
people are talking about Christmas already.
Well,
That's up in the stores. The music is starting.
But we don't have to do anything other than go shopping. I can live with that. Everybody does it on Amazon anyway.
Boy, I don't know. I'll take the fall activities over November Christmas decorations. No thanks.
Wait till the kids get older and they want to go do 7 candy activities. Easter's getting the same way. Got an Easter egg hunt this day. You got a candy hunt this day. You got a sock hop another day.
Sock hops are still a thing.
27 days of Easter. Candy. There's a dance. There's another trunk or treat, only with pastels. It's getting out of control.
Well, to bring it full circle, Nebraska got tricked by Purdue last weekend, 28-23. What were they, 7-point favorites?
7.5, I think.
Right in that range at home.
It was a bag of crap game, let's be honest. Second half. First half. I didn't even like the first half.
It was where someone puts the flaming pile of doo-doo in front of the door.
Yeah.
You ring the bell, and the other person opens it and steps on it.
Or depending on your
That was
perspective,
Saturday.
it's the guy. Nebraska was the guy handing out toothbrushes on Halloween.
Like, I felt like that was a game on Saturday where I felt like the most like, all right, I'm ready to be done with my story. I'm ready to do the notes, and I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not even leaning in. It's 28-17, and I'm like, run clock. I don't blame fans for going home.
Oh, God, no.
I don't see any more of that.
Their time
that's why I
was-
said what I said in the vid. Is this what you want this to look like? Whether they win or lose, is this what you want to watch all day long? You know, guys running around, throwing 40-yard passes. I mean, it's not what we grew up on.
Certainly not.
You're a Steelers fan. It's not what you grew up on.
No.
You grew up on defense.
Well, I grew up a little bit on Ben
They threw
Roethlisberger
the
chucking
ball.
that thing, but yeah.
You know, you grew up on Jerome Bettis.
Oh, yeah.
You grew up on big,
Fast Willie Parker.
physical,
Yeah.
Mike Tomlin football.
Alan Faneca, yeah.
And they're not very good when they can't run the ball, but running the
true.
football, playing defense, hitting people really hard, intimidating people, that's what you grew up on. I grew up on kind of the same thing. Like, it was the defense would scare the crap out of the other team, and they would run the football, and then occasionally they'd throw it to open players, and they'd hit the open players. And, you know, maybe they lose a couple games a year. And I'm not saying it's always going to be like that, but, like, when I watched Nebraska on Saturday, same deal when I watched Minnesota, I'm like, yeah, they're running speed options, and they're trying to run these, long crossing passing patterns. It just feels like I'm watching a group of 5 team. And even, and if they were in the group of 5, they'd be damn good. But it's like I feel like I'm watching a team that's not playing in the Big Ten.
To be fair, the best team in the Big Ten, the team that's coming to Memorial Stadium this weekend, also plays a little bit like that.
A little. They run like MFers, though.
They do.
Yeah. When they run the football, they pull linemen and they beat the shit out of people. So they're a little bit better in the sense that when they want to run the ball, they just do it. And I love watching that. Like, I like watching Ohio State because they'll come in here. You were there 2 years ago when that one guy, Josh Myers, who now plays for the Packers, launched Muhammad Berry about 11 yards in the air.
Yes.
And then, Khalil Davis came in and hit him on the helmet or something. And it was like the second drive of the game, Jimmy. The game's over. I mean, that was just unbelievable to watch that. I'm like, this team's going to kick the shit out of Nebraska. And they did. They kicked the crap out of everybody until they played Clemson. So, yeah, true. They do spread it out and like to throw it around, but
They got better.
Man, can they run the ball.
Sure. And they have much better pieces with which to employ that strategy.
No,
both running the ball and throwing the long
there's no
crossing
question.
patterns and stuff.
You could take one of their running backs, even Master Teague.
Ooh, yes.
What about Master Teague?
He's
you could
still
put him
around.
on Nebraska's team.
All right, well, we're going to get to Ohio State. We're going to get to a little Adrian Martinez talk, a little Nebraska ball. But our big red idea is looking back a little bit more at the Purdue game and saying, why has Nebraska been unable to beat teams that it should beat, teams that essentially have been its peers in the West? They're 6-15 against West teams under Scott Frost, 4-8 against teams named Illinois, Purdue, or Minnesota. And so what can you guys point to at the continued struggles where in the preseason you look at those teams and you say, early on it was, that's a win, and then it became, well, that's an opportunity for a win, and it just hasn't happened. What has it been about those teams and Nebraska's inability to win those games?
I see two things. First, when you play games like that where the opponent is, as Nebraska likes to say, I consider Minnesota, Purdue, Illinois, those kind of teams. I think the nameless, faceless opponent kind of shtick works there because those teams all feel similar to me. They don't play the same way, but Minnesota was trying to do the same thing that Purdue was doing. They were trying to hold on to the ball and march their way down the field inch by inch. And when you're playing against these teams who are playing that sort of style, you have to be able to lean back on something that you do well, be able to repeat success. And the only thing that Nebraska really has been able to repeat success with offensively this year is here's a big play. Let's try to generate something.
Slot machine.
Yes. Let's pull something out. We're going to throw the ball down the field. Hopefully someone comes down with it,
They
right?
need to hire you, Casino Man.
Not if I'm with Jimmy. The cooler, yeah.
I don't need that. I don't need that right now. And then number 2, it's just they just can't seem to figure out how to channel the energy that they play with in those big games and recreate it for the smaller just games you got to show up and win. You know, the Michigan, the gap between how they play against Michigan State shows up on the scoreboard, but also it's just like when you watch that first Minnesota drive, everyone in the stadium could tell, hey, something's off here. What's going on? Why is Minnesota, who everyone knows is going to come out and do nothing but run the ball, gouging for 4, 5 yards at a time? Why is that happening when they know that's the plan? And, you know, coaches talk all the time about running the ball is just about being gap disciplined, following your rules, and being a football guy and plowing forward. That's not the hardest thing in the world to stop. So the combination of those two things, they just can't seem to find consistency in identity or motivation each week.
That's good stuff right there. I wrote about it, you know.
Yeah.
Sean Beckton gave I thought a pretty interesting answer today that I wanted to read, because I asked him what's the number one thing the offense could do, and he kind of answered for the offense, but he also answered pretty much for
The team.
for the whole team. I don't know if you were over there for that, but he said, we've got to play just a little harder across the board, and we've got to focus in a little bit harder across the board. Our lapses have been killing us. Quarterback, running back, tight ends, receivers, O-line. Our lapses have caused us not to execute on plays that we can basically have scored on. I can count 4 to 5 every single week. If somebody plays a little bit harder or somebody has a little bit more focus, we're sitting here 8-1, 7-2. Better season, particularly just on offense. And then I asked him what it means to play harder, and he said, you've just got to grind a little bit harder. I'm old school, come from a background where I had to fight for everything I've got. We try to instill that in our tight ends, obviously, but I'm trying to instill that on everybody on the team. You've got to fight and grind just a little bit harder. That's, to me, telling. And Becton often has these kind of quotes, right? And I think there's just... some of it is when they go against these teams that don't have, a numerical ranking next to their names. I think there's been a little bit of a letdown for whatever reason. Illinois, Minnesota, and Purdue are 3 of those teams. I think Northwestern has their attention enough now, and Iowa and Wisconsin do too. But it's those 3 teams that I don't think really, rise to the level. Rutgers last year. Rutgers is not a named team, and Nebraska played actually really poorly for much of that game. They won 28-21, but, I mean, you watched it. You're like, this is bad football. I mean, they weren't playing well until they finally took over. They had 4 turnovers, gave up a kick return for a touchdown. Usually you don't win those games. And I think part of what happens is they just don't have the level of edge and whatever you want to call it week in, week out. And I think Scott kind of referred to that. When he's saying the comment about, well, we got him ready to play, and I think in the second half we were ready to play, and you could just tell somewhere in there, it was like, I'm not getting exactly what I want from these guys, and I think he had the captain's talk because he's not getting exactly what he wants. From a strategic standpoint and from a big global perspective, teams have a book on Nebraska, and they've made all the notes in the golf book. They know all the yardages. And the bottom line is that if you are a team that is inferior to Nebraska's talent or equal to Nebraska's talent, you can beat them by sitting on the ball, running for 3, 3, 3, 4, throwing short passes, which Nebraska will give you because they're not big into press coverage and being real tight, throwing those short passes, hitting those short passes, converting third downs, punting the ball well. If you do that enough times, you can count on Nebraska self-destructing. And once they self-destruct, they're going to give you something. And once they give you something, you're going to win. And that's exactly what happened on Saturday. Nebraska's, Purdue did not score points on its first 2 drives. All they did was bleed clock. Now, in bleeding clock, what did they do? They kept the ball away from Nebraska. When Nebraska finally gets its second possession, early in the second quarter, they're up 7-0. Mm-hmm. They finally get their second possession. What happens? It's first and it's first and whatever. It's first and 20 because they had a penalty, and he throws an interception that's returned for a touchdown. They get impatient. They get antsy. They can't hold still. Second half, they start with the ball. Gosh, wasn't that a perfect opportunity, Evan, Jimmy, to eat 6 or 7 minutes off the clock?
Just put it
Sure.
You score there on a long drive, kind of feels like you put it away.
It's 24-14, and Purdue has to score fast. They don't have a choice because there's only 7 minutes left in the third quarter. Instead, what they do is they're thinking, well, when it goes 2nd and 1, let's have a shot call. And then that's all fine. But doesn't it work against the overall strategy that you could have employed there, where you move the ball methodically down the field, eat 7 minutes off the clock, and all of a sudden they're down 2 scores, and they're like, we only got 3 possessions left in this game. We better do something. And isn't that when you force the turnover? And they allowed the game to flip. And then they had it 1st and 10 at the 40, and nobody blocked somebody. And it's just a frustrating product to watch. And at the end of the game, I was just like, Z asked me, well, the time is here, and I said, I'm going to take a second here to think about what I want to say. And what it came out of me was like, is this how you want it to look? And it had nothing to do with the numbers or the stats or the final score, but is this how you want this? Is this what you want the football program team to look like? It'd be kind of like asking, do you want a basketball program that, tries to score 100 points every game, usually doesn't, and then loses, 93 to 74? They scored 74 points, but what difference does it make? They lost. So it's kind of like that. To me, that's a big question for Nebraska to answer going forward. If you're thinking about the tenure of Scott Frost, is this, because this is what it looks like. Win or lose, this is kind of how they are.
Great points from both of you guys. What I would add is I think, to an extent, we almost are still, especially the Nebraska fan base, I think is still recalibrating how its perception of those teams. So 10 years ago, Illinois, Purdue, Minnesota were not good teams. The coaches there were not great coaches. They weren't recruiting at a high level. They didn't have facilities comparable to Nebraska. And when you think about the transformation of the Big Ten, fueled through television contracts and money, it's transformed those teams. When you go and see their facilities, when you see what they're able to recruit to, it's really not all that different from Nebraska. I think Bill Moose said it a year or so ago. He assessed Nebraska's facilities at 9th, 10th best in the Big Ten, something like that.
Right.
And so I still think, as much as you want to turn it around, if you're Nebraska, there's, I think, still a lagging perception about what those teams are and what they're able to recruit. And 10 years ago, Nebraska could count on having more talent and better talent than them, and it's just not the case anymore. Whether through recruiting or whether through development, all those teams are better coached, they're better developed, and they're on par or better than Nebraska in all the support structure stuff that the Huskers used to be so good at. So I think that's maybe more of an ancillary sort of factor to what you guys are talking about too.
I think when Sam was talking about being antsy and not being able to sit still, I was thinking about after the game we talked to Nuri Nawili, the left guard, and we were asking him, you guys were running the ball pretty well in the first half. Why did you get away from that in the second half? And he said, well, we got behind, and it's really hard. Yeah. It's really hard to run the ball when you get behind. They said that after Illinois as well. And I think with Illinois they had a little bit more leg to stand on. They trailed 30-9 or something in that game.
Yeah.
Saturday they were down by 1 score for a large portion of that second half,
right.
Third quarter. You can definitely run the ball.
They were ahead until late in the third quarter.
Exactly. And Jacques Yant, who averaged 15 yards per carry in the first half, got 2 carries the rest of the game. I mean, there's a place for him to try, just, 1 carry. I think he had 2 more carries.
Austin Allen said
one
they
more
had
carry.
more plays on the play sheet that they had to call.
Oh, so they don't believe it.
Like, well, what are we doing?
They the minute they get behind, they're like, we can't run the ball.
They kind of play like how I would play Madden. It's just like, okay, running the ball's not working. It's time to chuck it. 4 verts, slot crossers.
No, it's Jimmy. I think that's exactly what's going on. Like, it's frustrating to watch. But I think on some level, for them to say that we were behind, we weren't behind. We were behind until there was like 3 or 4 minutes left in the third quarter. And then, like you said, they're behind one score.
Yeah, if you're
Run
the
the football!
If you're behind one score, the game script
don't
is
believe it.
essentially the same as if it's
It doesn't
tied.
matter. Right.
They don't believe it. That's the problem, is that, they get behind, and then they're trying to throw a big crossing pattern. Same thing at Minnesota, Jimmy. 5 minutes left in the game. 5 minutes, 4:58, 4:53, I can't remember what it was. You're down, what were they down? 21-16?
Something like that.
5 minutes left in the game. Run your offense. You don't need to go get 35 yards on first down. Run your offense. Just run it. Run the football.
And Saturday was perfect for that because Braum, known as the throwing guy, ran it 41 times.
Yeah.
Because of to your point about how to beat Nebraska, and he stuck with it.
Yeah.
Like, it takes some patience to be able to, it's one thing to kind of come in and maybe script it and do something the first way in the first quarter. You get to the third quarter and you're still down and you're still running it. I mean, they showed a patience that Nebraska staff just doesn't show.
That's right.
They just don't.
They
get
beat
excited and
Illinois
they get antsy.
13-9. They lost in Minnesota 20-13. Braum obviously wants to score 60 points a game. That's his heart. But he's adjusting.
Mm-hmm.
They're 5-3 because he's adjusting. And these teams have adjusted in Nebraska, and Nebraska has not adjusted back. And I don't know what they do. The challenge is, we've talked about this so many times. What happens this week is almost immaterial. Like, it doesn't matter. I mean, if they win, it matters. But if they go in and they play well and they lose 35-21, let's say that. Okay. It doesn't matter what for next week. It doesn't matter for what they're going to do with Wisconsin. Because Ohio State can play shitty and win. They don't have to play their best game. They just have better players. So last year they won 52-17, and I don't think anybody on the Ohio State side of things would say they played well.
That was a close game through halftime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not hard for them. They didn't play well against Penn State, 1-9. So part of the challenge of playing this team is you can feel like you've done some good things and made some progress, and it really has no bearing on what happens the next game. Like, Wisconsin's going to be Wisconsin again, and they're going to do exactly what they always do against you. And if you can't stop what they do, it doesn't matter how well or poorly you played against Ohio State.
Well, let's get into that a little bit. So, Ohio State this week, number 6 in the country, just the one loss, college football playoff contender as usual. Short of a win, which obviously changes the conversation, does it matter what Nebraska does? Does it matter if they play the way they played against Michigan last month and lose by 3? Or is it the same if you lose by 5 touchdowns and people are streaming out like it's 2017 again? I don't know. Where do you guys come down on that? Because they've played up to the good competition. They played up to Michigan State, Michigan, Oklahoma. They've played down to all these other teams that we've mentioned too. So does it matter?
I think it matters because Ohio State's a leg above the rest of the teams in the Big Ten. So if you have a Michigan-esque game against Ohio State, that's a different thing than having a Michigan-esque game against Michigan or against Michigan State. Now, if they lose by 3 points, it'll be the same old, we're so close, we're so close. People are tired of hearing that. I understand that, but understanding that Ohio State would probably have to have a couple of things go wrong for that to happen. If Nebraska can stack up with Ohio State in any meaningful way, I do think that matters a little bit for the goodwill of the program. They need it however they can get it right now. On the flip side, I'm wondering, where's the cutoff for this is a failure? Like, if you lose by 3 touchdowns against Ohio State, I think you're just par for the course. That's what happens to most of the teams that Ohio State plays against. But is 4 touchdowns, is that what we're thinking? I mean, it probably matters how they lose by 4 touchdowns, but I'm wondering, when does it become a situation where the crowd is feeling as bad about the program as it did last week against Purdue when they lost a close one?
Well, we saw it in 2017. We saw it in 2019.
Oh, yeah.
When they're marching down the field.
Yeah, the 2019 game was, that was an all-time team that we watched. Best team I've ever, seen in person since '95 Nebraska. I know they didn't win the national title, granted, but that was an unbelievable team.
I'll never forget the 2017 game, though, Sam, when they were blowing out Nebraska.
Yeah.
You knew where the season was headed, and you had me go down to talk to fans outside that. And I'll never forget that because fans were streaming out of that place, and there was like a fire truck in West Stadium for some reason, and like the sirens were flashing, and it just felt like a disaster. It felt like a disaster. And talking to people, a lot of people felt guilty. They said, we know we should stay and support them, but they suck. So we're not gonna stay. And some other people said, we're gonna go get drunk and we're gonna come back later because this isn't fun to watch. And I just wonder if there's potential for that if things really get out of hand Saturday for some sort of a mass exodus again. So in that sense, I do think it matters because they have played close to higher level competition. That would keep people in the seats, I think, if it's another one-score game. But if it unravels like it did 4 years ago and 2 years ago, man, that's the fans voicing their thoughts. That's how they do that, and that's a pretty powerful thing to watch.
I totally agree with you as it relates to the worst-case scenario. If they lose by a lot of points, there does come a point where it becomes demoralizing. If they lose by like 7, it's like giving a presentation to, I don't know, Coke or Pennzoil or some huge company and finishing second. You still didn't get the account, and you're going to have to go get those accounts later in the month at the smaller companies. Because if you don't get those accounts, you're not making any money. So finishing second here didn't make any difference. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the win. Well, if the win, well then, I mean, you know, it's the Price is Right theme music. I mean, that's just if they won, they're not going to win. But you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, we're getting to the point now where it's like, do you realize that, you keep coming close on these accounts, but you're not actually getting the accounts, so you're not making any money. So it's good that you're close, but something's keeping you from doing it. And when you go out to the mid-level accounts that you ought to be able to land and you don't get them, it really doesn't make any difference that you had a great presentation for Michigan. And part of I feel like I know the fan base fairly well. And what I would say is there's two things that are true. One, and I'm speaking for the fan base when I use the I, we, must, us here. Don't embarrass us. Don't embarrass us off the field. Don't. The lone exception being 95, when you could embarrass us off the field because we were so good on the field that it didn't make any difference. Don't embarrass us. Don't embarrass us off the field. Don't turn into a renegade program. Nebraska doesn't want that. Don't embarrass us on the field, 2017 Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
Or we'll leave. They left in 2007 against Okie State, down 38-0 at half, and
Yep.
they left down, I think it was, I can't even remember, I think it was 42-0 at half or 49-0 against Ohio State, and they're like, don't embarrass us, we're leaving the building. Goodbye.
Yep.
The other thing is Nebraska fans have an ego. They have a superiority complex. Again, I've covered the fan base long enough to know that I don't think I'm making an insult here. Don't lose to Illinois, Purdue, and Minnesota. Don't do it. It's inverse. The biggest games are the ones that you can't lose. Because the way that I think Nebraskans' psyche works is it's like Nebraskans in general are pretty modest people who aren't necessarily asking for the world. They don't necessarily want to change the world. They kind of want the world to stay the way it is, and the way that the world is that Nebraska's better than Purdue, Minnesota, and Illinois. And the thing that I think has happened that they have to try to figure out is the weeks when you play those teams, your foot has to be pretty firmly up rear ends. Because you have to have a read of the fan base, and the read is, yes, it would be wonderful to beat Michigan, and we're going to play our asses off against Michigan. But it's going to be close to tyranny when you're preparing for Minnesota. And if Scott Frost keeps his job, which I think he might, and it's not tyranny when they play Minnesota next year, then there's something wrong. Because it needs to be close to red alert. Now, Nebraska's not allowed to care too much about any opponent, right? Like
Nameless, faceless.
They're not allowed. No, I mean, this is just not Scott.
Just fans, sure, yeah.
They can't have a rival. They can't get too upset. They can only be angry when they lose. But a coach has to understand, I know this fan base well enough to know that you cannot lose to these teams. These three teams, no. And if Rutgers is on the schedule, don't go losing to them either. And don't lose to any group of 5 teams either. You better beat those teams. You don't get to lose those games. And you want to know the coach that understood that and treated his team like a monster.
Bo Pelini, yeah.
He never lost those games. He rarely lost them. He lost to Minnesota a few times. Minnesota was pretty good under Jerry Kill, but he didn't lose the other ones because he was a little nuts, and his players knew that if they lost those games, their coaches would be in a funk for weeks. And I feel like that level of accountability has to be present. And I think with Scott, it's hard. I think he wants the team. He keeps talking about it being a player-led team and wanting to motivate the players and wanting them to do the heavy lifting. If we had listened to Mike Riley say that, we would have said, Mike Riley's not a leader. You have, at some level, you have to understand the urgency that goes into beating Purdue. You know?
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't sense the urgency when Becton says that. He's a tight ends coach. He's been here for 4 years. The urgency that Nebraska needs to beat even a middling team in the Big Ten, I just don't know if they have it. And they'll have it this week for the first quarter, but do they have urgency all the time? I don't know. That to me is the biggest question about why, again, you can lose to Ohio State. Who cares? Beat Wisconsin and Iowa and you're coming back. And you need to move. It needs to be hell and rain on those weeks. I mean, everybody's got to be on pins and needles. And too many times I've come to press conferences and dudes are just like, well, it's going to go have a good team. I'm like, there's no tension here. It's just, it's a good opportunity. It sounds pragmatic.
Excited to play him.
Doesn't it sound pragmatic? It just sounds like, this is a great game. We want to play this game. Yeah, we're excited. This is why you come to Nebraska. Well, sure, but you come to Nebraska to beat the bad teams and go to bowl games and sit on beaches.
I don't know if you do anymore.
That's my point.
It's been a long time.
Not recently, no.
Well, let's get into the Adrian Martinez aspect of this. Year 4 as a starter. I mean, and this all plays into what we're talking about, right? Year 4 as a starter could come back for year 5, though I wonder how this last month may have affected that. I mean, I guess a similar question. Why hasn't it worked with Adrian as the guy?
Can I say I don't know? Because I don't really know. I'm racking my brain. The dude's extremely talented. You have a mobile quarterback that usually gives you an advantage as an offense. But what I was thinking about earlier today is the quarterback. I was thinking about what Scott said on Monday about he was worried about when he chewed Martinez out on the sideline after going for the first or not going for the first down hard enough or whatever, and he was worried that forced Martinez into pressing, and Frost took blame for that interception. I think that was the shovel pass interception, right? He said that Martinez was pressing, and that's the one that he was talking about with that. Is that
the shovel?
Yeah. Okay. So that is a reflection of how a quarterback mimics the mannerisms of his coach. Scott freaked out when Adrian didn't try to make the big play. So his brain said, okay, I'm in another situation where I need to make a play. I'm trying to make a play. He tried a little bit too hard. It didn't work out. So we've been talking this whole time about how Scott and the rest of the coaches, the offensive coaches, are a little bit too antsy. They're not very patient. Wouldn't the same thing apply to Adrian? I think maybe I'm doing too much analyzation here. Analysis, is that a word? Analysis?
Yeah, good.
And maybe that's happening. I haven't been here as long as you guys, but that's a thought that I had.
What do you think, Evan?
I mean, I would put the system in there too. How many systems do you see that run the ball as prominently as Nebraska has with Martinez? Very few.
Mm-hmm.
And while that gives you an advantage in the run game, in theory, it gives defenses an extra player to account for. I think we've seen more negative than positive come from that. When you talk about injuries, in most of his seasons here, he's been injured, maybe with the exception of stretches of last year.
Mm-hmm.
And so when your offense leans so heavily on one guy and he's not 100%, then you get the kind of stuff where you're running around and passing, and where you put in Luke McCaffrey and he runs it 25 times or whatever it is. And the other part of that strategy, as far as the downside too, is the turnovers. I mean, how many times has Martinez lost the ball now? 15, 20? I mean, I'm going to have to go back and add it up, but the turnovers lost fumbles over the course of his career.
Well, I think there's been 2 this year. 15, I think.
15 or so. So the turnovers that have come from that too. So I think the system hasn't done him any favors. Like that's the one thing I often try to think about is what if Adrian Martinez were at Minnesota this year? How would his season go if he wasn't asked to run it as much? What if he was at Purdue this year? Like, what would that look like? And I feel like he would play better than he has at Nebraska. And so then to me that points it back to the system. That points it back to the supporting cast. That points it back to development. I think, his best season here has still been his freshman year, 2018, when he was explosive, when he played without burden, whether that be kind of a moral burden or the burden of carrying a state or whatever. I think all those things factor into it. And he just honestly hasn't seen open guys a lot of the time, too. How many times in the press box have we said, throw it right now? There's a guy right there, and a couple.
It's harder, He's playing the game 3D. We're 2D.
Understood.
Yeah, I get it.
But then a couple beats go by.
His coaches also called him out for it,
and maybe
once
the
or
guy's
twice.
covered.
Yes,
so what makes it tough is he's such a good guy. He's got, by all accounts, from our interactions with him over 4 years, he's been a good leader. He's been a real good person. He's overcome a lot in his personal life. But man, there was a point, maybe it was last year, where you just kind of said, "This is who he is. This is who he is."
Then everybody was on, was the best player on the planet 5 weeks through the season. You thought he was really.
He was playing really well.
Well,
he was.
He was playing well, but you know what's gonna happen as the season goes on.
Well, I didn't.
Whoa! What happened? What actually happened? He got hurt. He's hurt. This is what happens.
Mm-hmm.
So the part where, part of it, when you say you didn't know that, you of course you didn't know. But look at him from the first drive at Michigan State?
Yeah.
Look at him from the first drive at Michigan State, Jimmy, until before then and after. The same player. And he's made some cool plays against Michigan. He did some nice stuff against Northwestern. Anybody could have done that. But, he's rolled up his ankle. He did that, I think, in practice. He also got dinged a little bit at the end of that Michigan game. And then there was a rolled up ankle in practice and a jaw. And God only knows what else. In 2019, it was a knee. And then it was his non-throwing shoulder because he was diving for a touchdown at Purdue.
Yep.
And he had to get shoulder surgery. In 2018, it was a knee. And then he got jacked up at Michigan. And they had pulled him out because, I don't know, maybe he had a concussion. I don't know. It's just one damn thing after another. And the reason it is because sooner or later he gets popped because they haven't put the kind of offense around him that it's designed for him to manage the offense. He is the offense. So you're right when you say he was playing really, really well. That's accurate. Injuries catch up to him because of the system. So we've all seen these glimpses for many years now of him, and then he gets hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And that's tough. It's hard for him, and Tommy used to get hurt. Tommy was a little more durable. Tommy played through some stuff that very few people could. Honestly, Taylor Martinez, until he got that foot thing, which was hideous, played through some stuff. He had 30-some starts in a row. But these quarterbacks get banged up. Eric Crouch's junior year. Eric was playing on some stuff that junior. You remember that junior season? 2000.
Mm-hmm.
Nebraska had a great team. They lost. They had a weird game against Oklahoma. Bad second half. Then they go down to K-State, and they should have won. They lost 29-28. Frank's fucking throwing the ball all over the place, and I don't know what they're doing that day. They run a toss pitch to Dan Alexander, and it's a touchdown, and then they're throwing it again. And what we find out later is that they couldn't really run Eric that day because he had a horrible balloon ankle. That stuff happens when you're in that offense. And it cost them a berth in the Big 12 championship game, where they would have played Oklahoma again. I would have liked Nebraska's chances in that game if they had gotten a chance to play it. And they play Oklahoma again. Maybe they win it. If they win it, they're going to the O Bowl and they're playing Florida State for the national title. And it's because he got dinged up. They lost by 1 point to a really good Kansas State team, not these teams that Nebraska lost to, whatever. Not Purdue 2021, but like an 11-1 K-State team. And there's so many opportunities when you look back and go, they could have won a national title here, they could have won a national title here, but their quarterback got banged up. And that largely changed. They won a national title in 94 with Brooke Berringer and Matt Turman. Now, Berringer is obviously a historically whatever. He's, a hero. Brooke Berringer is not one of the 10 best quarterbacks in Nebraska history, though, right?
Right.
Well, they won because they had all the pieces around Tommy, and then when Tommy got hurt, they had all the pieces around Brooke. And that's what you got to do. And I think part of what's happened is T.O. would build the teams around the quarterback. Since he left, it's been about the quarterback, with the exception of maybe the 4 years that Callahan was there. It's been about the QB. And when you build your team around the QB, you better watch out. You might get him hurt.
Do you feel like these last few weeks have changed your perception at all about whether Adrian would come back next year, assuming the staff or Frost is back in 2022?
I certainly feel like he's less likely to come back. I was feeling pretty good whenever we had this conversation, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago. I thought he was coming back. He's been more banged up now. He's taken more of the beating from being Nebraska's quarterback, which is like being, it's like being the, it's like being the Alabama quarterback, except you don't win. Everyone's looking at you the same amount, except they're complaining. They're complaining a lot more, and you can hear them because the arena that they're complaining in, this world is smaller. Then Alabama's got a lot more people looking at them, from a national perspective. Everyone's looking at you really close here, and they can yell in your ear and you'll hear it. So I think that, if I were Adrian, if Adrian Martinez, I'm just taking my opinion here. 2 weeks ago, if I'm Adrian Martinez, I was thinking, we're pretty close here. I'm thinking what Scott's saying about we are a few transfer portal pieces away. I can get behind that. And now I'm rethinking that. I'm thinking, man, we keep losing to these bad teams, and I keep getting beat up, and I keep getting beat up by people online or, I think it was in Dirk's column where people were swearing at him on the field or something like that. That was the whole team, not just Adrian. That would make me reconsider. It's been a rough couple of weeks since then.
I feel like the odds of him departing have gone up in the last month, the last 3 weeks, because of what's gone on. You think back, like I often think about some of the sixth-year guys, JoJo and Ben Stilley and Markel Dismute, guys who could have gone on with their lives. They could be on an NFL roster of some kind. They could be moving on with their careers. And instead they chose to come back. And you just got to wonder in their heart of hearts if they would do it differently, knowing how this season has transpired. And, if you're Adrian and you look at all that you've gone through, all the injuries, all the rehab, all the prep, and you have nothing tangible to show for it to this point. Your bank account's probably doing okay because of NIL. You're making memories with your teammates and everything, but man, it just feels like there's been a ceiling that's been hit with the roster as it's currently constructed. And so, it's not impossible that he returns for year 5, but if Scott Frost comes back, like, I think that's one thing that's interesting to a lot of people, and I would include myself in that, is like, what can Scott Frost's offense look like with somebody other than Adrian Martinez? We saw what it looked like at UCF. We saw what it looked like at Oregon. Can it hurt to put somebody else in there, whether that's Logan Smothers, whether that's somebody in the transfer portal, whatever? I think that's part of it too, is, man, you see all these other programs changing quarterbacks midstream to mixed results. Oklahoma did it. Why can't Nebraska do it? What would that look like? I think there's some intrigue in that.
A lot of the questions that we were just asking about why hasn't it worked with Adrian might be answered if we took Adrian out of the question. No?
Yes. I don't know what Logan Smothers gives you, so I'm not sure what the It's hard to tell. I know he's a good runner.
Are we sure it would be Logan Smothers? We were just talking out in the hallway about transfer portal guys.
It's sort of like our conversation about Wan'Dale Robinson, where it was, he was their best running back last year, and so they leaned on him, and he left because of it. So now that he was gone, they had to address that a different way. I wonder if that sort of effect would play out at quarterback, where, okay, you can't rely on your quarterback to be making these plays ad lib. So what do you do? I think it's that sort of thing that's fascinating to me, is how do they address that position if it's not Martinez? We don't know because we haven't seen it.
I said my point 2 weeks ago about what I thought would happen. I mean, I was obliquely referring to it, but, with very, very rare exception, I would say that all of the juniors will and should, that it's time. But that's just me. So we'll see what happens. I was wrong last year. I was a little surprised that some of those players came back. Maybe they came back because of NIL. Maybe that's why they came back. Maybe that's why they would come back again.
Another way to spin that NIL thing, though, is it's not a bad nest egg to start with if you want to go on to whatever the next thing you're doing is, it's not a bad start.
No, it's not a bad start. To be clear, I think it's we can talk about it from whatever standpoint. I think it's cool and neat that they're able to have some success financially. A lot of that stuff's immaterial if Nebraska doesn't win or lose. Like when I talk about doing this from the perspective of I write for the fans, it's not that I don't wish well for every single person involved in that operation from a financial standpoint, but and we're going to cover the NIL thing and the way that it perhaps can help Nebraska, win games in a variety of sports. But, that those things can work for you and they can work against you as it relates to winning games. You get in situations where this will happen in the future. You got guys that are making money and they're not playing, and it's a tricky conversation. I would move on. Hymas and Farniak, I think last year got it right. Because you're going to see this if they lose against Ohio State those last 2 weeks. Some of these guys are getting tired of being here now. You've been here 6 years, and things aren't going the way you hope. We kind of heard one comment after the Purdue game that I think was given in an emotional moment about fair weather fans, and you have grace for that, but that may not be the last one from a Husker, where at the end it becomes, you know what, and you can stay a place too long, and sometimes you can stay in college too long. You just can't, and I think it's time. That's just me. 5 years, it's time.
Well, before we go to picks, how about a little hoops talk? Couple exhibitions under the belt of Nebraska ball. We were talking about this a little bit, Jimmy, but I'm curious what your takeaways from those exhibitions have been, and particularly to the shooting point, because Nebraska shot the ball well. How much of that can carry over into the actual season, and how much of that is a product of sort of the atmosphere of the game and the opponents?
To the shooting point, it's one thing for them to tell us that, okay, we've got a lot of more shooters now. But it's another thing to see them make a bunch of three-pointers and see teams have to, see that when they say you can't give this guy any space, you actually can't get this guy. C.J. Wiltshire, Keisei Tominaga, Keon Edwards, these are guys who can really stroke the ball, and those are that you can do so much on offense just by having a well-spaced floor, having those kinds of guys where if you leave them, it's probably 3 points. To your point about the Big Ten thing, I think Colorado looked a lot like a Big Ten team. They had, I think, 3 or 4 guys 6'10" or taller. They looked bulky. They played that part. They had big guards. They were stronger. That's why they grabbed 23 offensive rebounds, which was not so great. But I think Alonzo Verge can get past a lot of defenders in the Big Ten, just like he got past every defender who was in front of him against Colorado and Peru State. And when Alonzo Verge gets past somebody, or him and Derek Walker play that pick and roll, Derek Walker's rolling and people draw off of him, Nebraska's in business. I would say that one of the negative takeaways I had from these last two games was, and these were very small sample sizes to be clear, but I do wonder how Nebraska functioned when Verge isn't on the court. Whether that's...
You asked Fred that.
I did. He said he's going to look at the film, which is a fine answer. But it just seems way less fluid. I was charting the 17-2 run from Colorado on Sunday night, and I think the first three possessions were Trey McKewon tries to dunk over a guy and almost did it. It was really cool, but he missed. Trey McKewon shoots a floater over two guys, and Trey McKewon turns the ball over in the backcourt and then commits a loose ball foul diving for it. Trey McKewon, I think, is a very good player for a variety of reasons. He's the best defender on this team, best perimeter defender on the team by a considerable margin, I think. I think when you get him going downhill, if he gets someone on his hip, not too many people are going to stop him from getting to the rim. He shot a career high from three-point range last year. All good things. He is not the ball handler that Alonzo Verge is. He doesn't have the court vision that Alonzo Verge has. And Alonzo Verge, how many minutes can that guy play? How many, Alonzo Verge is a slighter dude. I think he weighs about 160 pounds. Big Ten will beat you up. Like I said, big guards, thick guards that are going to be in that league. It's a lot to put on one guy. They'll figure out other avenues for playmaking. Wilhelm Breidenbach looks like a legitimate option there. They let Bryce McGowan's run some point at the end of the first half against Colorado to mix results. Made a nice pass. Also missed a couple of ugly shots. And it's super early. This team's going to come together on a lot of different fronts. The secondary playmaking will improve. But right now what I know is that they are very good on offense. They looked very good on offense when Alonzo was on the court. Not so much when Alonzo was off the court. And that's a major story to watch going forward because they're going to play some teams that will be able to score with them or defend them better when Verge is out there. And when he's off, there can't be that much of a drop when he's off there. It's, again, very small sample size. Don't want to blow this up too much out of proportion, but that is something that I noticed. They were not functioning the same way when Alonzo wasn't on the court.
What do you learn defensively about him? Anything? I mean, because we talk all the time about their offense and how they have pieces and they can shoot. What are they going to look like on defense?
Defense, they're going to switch a lot, which means they have some like-sized bodies. They're going to have they need guys who can guard multiple positions. They have that. Trey's that kind of guy. Wilhelm Breidenbach is a dude who I think can legitimately move his feet with a guard one-on-one if he gets caught in that spot. He was a part of a couple of traps that were successful. Another thing on this defense that they're going to need to be really good at is doubling in the post. When they play those really big time, the Hunter Dickinsons, the Kofi Coburns, Trace Jackson Davises of the world, and they did that really well against Colorado. Fred pointed out in the press conference. I think he said it on the radio show last night too. He said they were on point. And they were. They forced turnovers multiple times out of doubling post guys on defense. One thing they need to watch a little bit, particularly in the Purdue State game, freelancing a little bit, coming off, helping when it might not necessarily make sense to help, going for a steal when maybe that's not the best idea. Trey is ridiculous in the passing lane. That guy can cover so much ground, and he had 5 steals against Colorado. He is an all Big Ten level defensive player. Fred talked about after the Purdue State, we have to find the balance between, okay, you can make highlight plays with those turnovers, you can get the transition offense rolling, but also know when to reel that in. No, because if you gamble and you miss, you're almost guaranteed to give up a good shot. Your defense can't rotate fast enough once you get that far behind. So I think there will be some elements of feast or famine on the defensive end. Fred talks a lot about making that simple play on offense. It goes for the same on defense. They think they have the bodies there. If they just stay solid, stay in their place, they can be good enough on defense. And then obviously the rebounding thing against Colorado was a big deal. Against Purdue State, they only out-rebounded Purdue State by 1, and they won that game by 39 points. That's kind of crazy. That's really hard to do. They're going to need, Fred mentioned that they're going to need the guards to rebound a lot better. And there's a lot of, I was just talking to Doc Sadler on my drive up here. He said a lot of these guys and all these younger kids have always rebounded just off of talent. And yeah, of course, some of these guys are all-world jumpers and really tall, and they're not used to playing guys their size or bigger. So that makes sense to me. That's going to be a work in progress, but I do think the rebounding is going to be a persistent issue that you can't overcome the size, and it'll be interesting to monitor their defensive gambles.
Sounds about right. I think we can talk about Bryce McGowan's next week. I mean, there's a lot to talk about with this team. The double in the post thing is interesting. Obviously, Doc is really good at that. He's their defensive coordinator. In my personal experience, as the season goes on, players get banged up. It becomes harder and harder to do. It becomes harder and harder as the game goes on. You can do that really well early in a game. At the end of the game, when everybody gets a little bit tired, you got to be able to make plays. Guys got to emerge. It becomes a one-on-one game. You know this. You've watched enough basketball. So I'm really intrigued to see how it goes in November, because December is tough. And they're going to lose some games in December. You chalk it up. They're probably going to lose to Auburn. They're probably going to lose to Michigan. They probably should lose to Michigan. And Michigan Michigan's pretty good. I don't recall a December ever being quite like this for a Nebraska basketball team, unless you're talking like the knee era when they were playing a ton of ranked teams. They went out to the Rainbow and they played Michigan and North Carolina and that absurd list of teams. So November is going to be really important. Really important.
Bank those wins while you can. Yep.
They got to be Creighton. They should be Creighton. Creighton's got a lot of work to do.
You think they should be Creighton? I haven't seen them.
I do. Creighton's going to be a good team, I think, by the end of the year. But Creighton's really young. So if Nebraska's young, Creighton is, infant. Their most experienced returners are Alex O'Connell, which is nowhere near as good as Trey, and Kalkbrenner, who's decent and gives people some problems, but is not, he's not Hunter Dickinson. So yeah, I think they should. I think the skill level for Creighton's gonna get better and better and better. Athletically, they're probably equal. They're probably a little better than Nebraska athletically, but the skill level, I think Nebraska's ahead. I mean, I think Bryce McGowan's is maybe Nebraska's 5th best 3-point shooter, and he would probably be number 2 or 3 on Creighton's team right now. Boy, I'm sure if Creighton fans listen to that, they'll be pissed. But I do think Nebraska will win it. We'll go to picks.
Let's do picks.
Evan is up 3 on Jimmy and 10 on me.
Run the ball, baby.
We have a 13th one this week. It's going to be Nebraska against the line.
Hoorah.
All right. Utah at Stanford.
Man, I've watched so little of either of these teams. Utah, off reputation. They're tough.
Yeah, Utah. They've come through, in my picks, a handful of times this year.
Utah. Army and the United States Air Force Academy.
Ooh, that's fun. I'll go Air Force.
I'm going to go Army just because they're battle-tested. They've seen,
Our Air Force
they've
just
seen
sitting
quite
up
a
there
bit.
in their little cockpits,
Yeah.
not seeing any real action.
Air Force.
Playing video games up there.
All right, I'll give you guys that one.
Here's an interesting one. This, to me, is interesting. Wake Forest at North Carolina. And you know who's favored? North Carolina.
Yeah, it's not surprising to me. I'll take North Carolina. Wake Forest had a good run, but what's their most impressive win?
I don't
Virginia?
Yeah, Virginia's better this year. They had a fun offense. The Virginia BYU game last week was something to see.
Holiday Bowl.
Yeah.
I think Wake has a little bit of that 2019 Minnesota vibe to it, where they get the wins and get rolling a little bit. I think Wake's going to win this week.
Wake. I'm going to take Wake too. What is this game? Mississippi State at Arkansas. Mike Leach.
God, two teams that have been all over. Arkansas, the home field, kind of gives me that tiebreaker.
Mississippi State coming off of a decent-sized win, too. So
Oh,
I'll
yeah.
go Arkansas.
Arkansas for Jimmy. Arkansas for me. Michigan State at Purdue.
This would be
The line's like
hilarious.
a 3-point game on that, too. I still think Michigan State
I don't think Purdue's that good still.
gets it going.
Michigan State.
We agree again. Michigan State. Oklahoma State at West Virginia.
Take Okie State.
Well, that game just epitomizes what the Big 12 is going to be. Yeah, Okie State.
Okie State. West Virginia. Auburn at A&M.
Man, that's tough. I went off the Bo Nix train last week, and it failed me, so I'm hopping back on
Auburn for me, too.
Auburn.
I'm going to go A&M. I don't know which one we'll get. I think it's down there.
It is.
Give me A&M.
Tennessee at Kentucky. Tennessee.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking Kentucky.
Yep. I'm going Kentucky as well.
Iowa at Northwestern.
That's a fun one.
Iowa's a 12-point favorite.
Iowa.
The idea that Iowa's still only a 12-point favorite over Northwestern. What is the average Big Ten team favored by against Northwestern this week? I pick, I don't know, Minnesota. What's Minnesota favored against Northwestern? Be more than that?
Like 8 or 9 maybe?
Yeah.
Okay. You don't think? Because I was thinking Minnesota can score better than Iowa.
About the
Maybe it
same,
might be
maybe.
more. I don't know. Give me Iowa. Spent too much
I
time
thought-
talking about
I
this
thought-
game.
Iowa. Iowa for me. IGA. Grocery stores in Iowa. Independent Grocery Association. Oregon at Washington.
Oregon.
Yeah, I guess. Pac-12 just not. There's not a ton to get excited about there. I'll go Oregon.
Washington.
Mm.
North Dakota State at South Dakota State. It's not the biggest game in FCS this year, but it's always a big one.
I'll take North Dakota State.
NDSU.
I believe, didn't South Dakota State beat them last year?
Yes.
Yeah, in the playoffs, right?
NDSU is number 2 in the country. South Dakota State's
Yeah.
15th.
Revenge game.
They play up. I mean, it's always a big game.
NDSU as well.
I'll do the same. Texas at Iowa State.
I'm actually fairly confident Iowa State's going to win, which is just, if 2005 me would have heard that, like that Iowa State would be a solid favorite over Texas, it would have just blown my mind. But yeah, Cyclones I think are going to win.
Texas has lost 3 games, I think. I heard this earlier today. 3 games where they were entered the fourth quarter leading. It's not good. I'm still taking Texas though. I'm counting stars.
5 hearts. Iowa State. And Nebraska is a 15 and a half point underdog.
This tests the one score theme of the season here. 1 score loss.
Yes, it does.
I was kind of stunned when this line came out. I thought it was really low. So I'm taking the line. Taking Ohio State to cover.
Agreed. I think the 1 score streak ends.
Nebraska. To cover.
Because they always do what we don't think they're going to do, or
Early game.
okay.
I just think matters. I don't know.
I do think there is something to the idea that one thing Nebraska has shown us they can repeatedly do this year is take away big plays. Ohio State trades on big plays. Ohio State hemorrhages a lot of big plays. Nebraska can create big plays. There's something there.
Yep. The key to this game is not giving Ohio State points on defense. I think they scored 6 touchdowns this year. The other thing, and this is an interesting anecdote, interesting stat that I think will be in one of Dirk's columns this week. Nebraska has not scored on defense or special teams this year. They have given up 27 points. They are negative 27. And I think that's the worst in 12 years.
Mm.
Look, the defensive coordinator is coaching his tail off. They don't have elite difference makers over there, and it's hurting them. They have to play this kind of style of defense. They do the best they can with it, but they don't create a lot of turnovers. They don't put a lot of pressure on quarterbacks. They don't step in front of passes and take them back for touchdowns. It's just not who they are, and it's not what they do.
The lack of the pass rush is what really is the most concerning thing to me, because you let Olave and Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson run around there 3-4 seconds, they're going to get open. I don't care how well they're bracketed or how well Cam Taylor-Britt's playing. It's a recipe for
You can only take away one of them.
Right.
You can't take away both. And they've had a lot of success against Nebraska, those two players, in the last couple of years. So, you can probably take away a David Bell. You can't take away the other one. But nevertheless, I think Nebraska's going to do a pretty good job of stopping the run or slowing it down. And their quarterback doesn't run. He's not a runner. So, you don't have to worry about +1 run game. You just kind of, you find a way to stop those guys, and then you've got to play off coverage, and you've got to close good when he throws the football, and you got to hope C.J. Stroud makes some mistakes. And you know what? Sometimes redshirt freshmen make mistakes, even if they don't want to. So,
Well, we'll see how it goes this week, 11 o'clock. Big game. It's one of those games, again, that Nebraska's not expected to win. So maybe a moral victory is in the offing. Maybe not. We'll see how it goes. Into a bye week next week. I'm sure we'll be back with some more robust conversation at that point. Try to enjoy the game this week or enjoy the weather. Enjoy your weekend either way. Thanks for listening. Have a good night.